What I might do though, university or nearby.
Yeah, but they say
Just before you start, can I just loosen on the chair at the synagogue here, just for domestics?
Thank you. Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Lord Lieutenant, esteemed guests, welcome. I'm Hannah Kelly. I'm the lead chaplain for Essex Police, which is a new role, a really exciting one, and I'm really pleased to see so many people here today. There will be time sort of halfway through to break and have a cup of tea, biscuits and things like that, but it's really wonderful to see you all here, so thank you for coming here. I wanted to organise this event because it struck me over the years, and particularly in my short time at Essex Police, that you know, we have 9 protected characteristics, you know, to do with race, sexuality and so on, and they're really important, but one we don't talk about very much or champion is faith. And so that's one that I wanted to really explore today, obviously, in my role. And as we know that much, not all of course, but much of the discrimination that we see is due to ignorance, the fact that we're coming together to talk about that this evening, to find out a little bit more about some of the religions that are here in Essex, in the UK, is really vital. So I really thank you for being here and being open to that. You know, myself, I'm Roman Catholic. I was brought up, you do not talk about it, you don't tell anybody, just in case someone says something or someone makes a comment. And clearly, I have been open about it, and therefore I have had my share. But I know a lot of people that have had a lot worse. So it's really important that we discuss why, how we can tackle that as Essex Police as well, and how we can support our community. Just to say that later on in the evening we will have an opportunity to ask questions of our wonderful panel of speakers, and so there are little squares of paper on your table. I haven't put the pens out yet, I'll come around with those, but if you have any questions that crop up whilst the speakers are speaking, please write them down. You can then ask them out loud. If you're brave, and if not, if you're a bit more worried or want to remain anonymous, then please just write them down, I'll collect them in and I'll ask them on your behalf. That's no problem, but we're not going to have questions after each speaker, that way it will all be together at the end, and hopefully we'll create a good discussion, and please feel free at that point to ask any questions, as well as in the breaks as well. I'm hoping, and I think that I can speak on behalf of our faith speakers, to say, ask the question. Okay, we hope that everyone in the room has come to learn more and to find out more. So ask the question, try not to worry too much about how you ask it, because we know that this is a safe space, so please just ask away, and I know that our lovely speakers will just answer with their truth. So thank you for that. Before I hand over to ACO Lester from Essex Police, I'm just going to ask Rabbi Elf to come and welcome us. This is his synagogue. Thank you.
I'm not sure it's my synagogue. They're mad enough to invite me here every now and again to, on a regular basis, to talk and lead prayers. It's a pleasure on the synagogue's behalf to welcome you. This is the Reformed Synagogue here in Southend. There are now more than 2 synagogues in Southend, or 4, depending how you want to sort of count them up. And we've been trying to be involved in interfaith work over the years in various forms. You're possibly aware of the conference in October in Chelmsford. If not, we'll plug it later, I'm sure. Yes, there we go. But enjoy the evening, and I think that's all pleasure to welcome you, to have you all here, and we look forward to an interesting evening. Thank you.
So thanks very much, and thank you for the facility here, which it is truly brilliant, so we're very grateful. So by way of introduction, my name is Richard Lester. I'm the Director of HR and Learning and Development for Essex Police and Kent Police, and I'm part of the Chief Officer team, joined this evening by Assistant Chief Constable Andy Pritchard, who has come along from our Chief Officer team to, one, enjoy the event, and two, to listen to the brilliant speakers that have already been mentioned. A huge welcome, Lord Lieutenant, to this evening, and thank you for your attendance, and of course, everyone who's made the time to come along for this really important discussion that we're going to have. It's so vitally important for us in Essex to continue the conversation across our communities, and tonight, as Hannah has mentioned, is a first, I think, and I'm truly grateful to Hannah, Vernon and the team for organising such a brilliant event and filling the room. I would have said on such a wonderful sunny evening, but I'm not sure I can qualify that this evening as I drove into Southend. Diversity, equality and inclusion is so important to us at Essex, and we feel that's paramount to building trust and confidence across all communities, and for the most, having a peaceful society and making sure that we truly represent the communities that we serve and provide a service that's open and fitting for all. And we're doing really well in this space, and we've invested a lot of time and energy in making sure we listen, we respond, and we think about what our service provision looks like for the future. But I wanted to reassure you this evening that we're not complacent, that we don't sit on our laurels and think all of the work that we've been undertaking as an organisation is done, that we haven't more to be done, and that we can't continue the conversation in the way that's been described. So we're definitely not complacent. We definitely recognise there's more that we can do together, and it's truly brilliant to see so many people coming together to have the important conversations that we will have. Hannah's mentioned, we hear a lot in the media around hate crime, but rarely do we have religious-based hate or discrimination brought to the attention of ourselves and others around us. And it is a reality, and we're going to hear from our hate crime team this evening as to some of the challenges that perhaps are presented and that we can work collaboratively with yourselves and across the faith communities to try and improve and advance our position. We do want to engage, we want to listen to the conversation, we want you to get involved. So I know it's been mentioned about using the time, it's been very well set out in the room so you can have the discussion, but please use that opportunity to feedback because it helps us to build a stronger, more inclusive organisation and a better service to all of our communities, particularly when we're talking about the vital issue of faith, as has already been discussed. So we're going to listen, we're going to talk this evening, and we're going to hear from some fantastic speakers. I'm truly grateful for those that have prepared for this evening. I know a lot goes into the preparation and the messages will be clear. As Hannah mentioned, we now have our first full-time lead chaplain in Essex, and we're truly blessed to be in a position to have that position and to have such dedication and commitment from our inclusion team. And we will continue to progress this agenda, so the work doesn't end tonight, it simply starts. So a huge thank you for gathering this evening in the way that you all have. We filled the room, Hannah, so well done. I know you were a bit worried about how many people would turn up. You've definitely met that objective and exceeded it. We'll listen and we'll create an ongoing relationship together, so make connections this evening that will help us to continue to tackle this vitally important area. Get involved, and thank you so much for your time. We look forward to the rest of the evening together. So you're most welcome and enjoy the evening. Thank you.
So to put our evening into context, we have Catherine from our hate crime team to come and tell us about what's going on here in Essex and in the UK. Thank you, Catherine.
Good evening, Lord Lieutenant, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Catherine Springett and I'm the hate crime officer for the South OPA. My speech this evening is to raise your awareness of faith-based and hate crimes and instances, to provide you with some examples of faith-based hate crimes and instances, and to discuss how we deal as Essex Police with faith-based hate crimes and faith-based hate crime instances. So, for example, a faith-based hate crime is any criminal offence which is perceived by the victim or any other person to be motivated by hostility or prejudice based upon a person's perceived faith, in brackets religion. A faith-based hate incident is any incident where a crime has not been committed but where it's perceived by the reporting person or any other person that the incident was motivated by hostility or prejudice on a person's perceived faith or religion. So this is also known as a non-crime hate instance. So these instances feel like a crime to the person or to a perceived third party. So types of instance. So hate crime can be any type of crime or incident. Frequently it is antisocial behaviour, verbal abuse, neighbour disputes, harassment via social media, damage to property or physical violence. I'm going to now give you some examples. So example one, the victim has been verbally abused by a group of unknown youths. whilst on private property. The victim believes this is an anti-Semitic attack. So this would be an outcome 18, which was investigation complete, no suspect identified, crime investigated as far as reasonably possible, and the case was closed pending the first investigation. So this would be a hate crime incident. Example 2, suspect has shouted inflammatory religious remarks whilst a group of religious individuals have been walking past. We achieved an outcome 1, which was a racially aggravated public order, so this would be a hate crime. Example 3, the victim reports a group of unlined suspects have thrown approximately 20 rocks over their garden fence, causing one of the victim's paving slabs to dismantle and chip. The victim believes this is a religiously motivated crime. So this would be a hate crime incident, and outcome 18, so no suspects were identified, and pending further investigation, opportunities become available, we'd investigate that further. How is a hate crime incident dealt with? So it's victim focused as far as reasonably possible. Community policing teams and CID, so they can do greater patrols, foot patrols, restorative justice, so good practice to help both sides to understand the effects and impacts of their actions, CPS charging decision, and a court sentence uplift. So people who commit hate crimes are more likely to be charged by summons more than other crimes. So how to report a hate crime or hate incident to police? We always encourage people to dial 999 in emergency, or dial 101 if it's a lesser emergency. There's a live chat, and 999, there's an app for British Sign Language, Essex Police Online, in person at a police station, True Vision. Anonymous reports can be made. If victim details are not disclosed, the information will be used for community impact purposes. So, advising victims of hate crime. Other victims of hate crime, we always tell them to report the incident to police, to photograph injuries or damage, send one message to stop. So if this is happening via like text message or any other social media devices, we always say stop, because that becomes a hate crime if the perpetrator still continues to send messages when the victim has obviously stated stop. We also encourage victims to take screenshots of any hate crime, malicious communication, antisocial behaviour diaries, and we also tell them not to retaliate because it could escalate. So we've got a number of external agencies which offer, I should say, victims of hate crime and hate incidences support and advice. So we have Stop Hate UK, which is a 24-hour helpline. We have victim support, which refers victims and it offers them immediate emotional support, long-term support, and it also allows victims to also self-refer themselves. And we also have the CST, which is for our Jewish communities who are more informed and have a greater understanding of Jewish people, and it offers them the relevant support and advice. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you to Catherine for putting into perspective what's going on, and also telling us about the incredible work that people in Essex Police are doing. So I'm going to ask Shweta to come forward to deliver her speech, and I'll just sort the PowerPoint for you.
Thanks everyone. I was sitting in the front, so I didn't realize the room was this full. So good evening everyone, and thank you Hannah for organizing this. I would like to first start with appreciating the time everyone has given for this evening, especially respected ACO Richard Lester, His Majesty Lord Lieutenant of Essex, Mrs. Jennifer Tolhurst, and all the distinguished speakers. So I'm going to quickly share, as was on the slide, I'm going to quickly talk about Sikhism, which is a religion which me and my husband are here to represent. So I'm Shweta Kaur, and I'm here with my husband Jaspal Singh, and we are from group Sikhs of Chelmsford, from Chelmsford. And we are a small group of community people where we gather together and do our monthly prayers. We do our community events, we do our social events in the public. We did Vaisakhi event, which is a formation of Sikh festival on High Street last year. We participated in the local council's carnival this last month, and we also some of the young kids were present in the inter-county Essex and Kent, inter-county Essex versus Kent match. So you can see us all on social medias, Instagram, Facebook page, everything. So that's about the group. I'm going to talk about Sikhism and Sikhs, and I know it's quite a heavy slide, so I'm not going to go on it point by point because I don't think everyone would appreciate that. But I would just like to bring into notice, like, so when I talk about Sikhism as a religion, it's one of the youngest religion compared to some of the other few religions which have been there for more than thousands of years than Sikhism was formed. And as a Sikh, we worship all the Sikhs worship Guru Granth Sahib Ji. That's our religious book, which contains all the hymns, all the prayers, all the recital, everything which we believe in is the principle of our lives which we follow to, and that is given the place of God in our. We don't believe in idol worship. We don't believe in having like photos or anything, because for us that book contains everything. All the answers to any questions in life contains in that book for us. So that's like the key, most important thing. So if in a Gurdwara, if you see us in a Sikh worship place called Gurdwara, if you see, we go and worship, and there's a book. So that's our God. That's everything for us. Distinguished identity, as you can see, myself and my husband, I'm wearing a scarf over my head. It's Juni. My husband's wearing a pagri. So that's our distinguished identity. We keep our hairs. We have uncut hairs. We never cut our hairs. That's part of one of the five K important K. So it's like K is in like, because it's called Kesh, which is in Hindi, it means hair. I'll speak about the 5 Ks in the next slide. The other one is we have the surname of Singh for all the men and Kaur for all the women, given to us by a 10th Guru, Shri Guru Gobind Singh Ji. So I am Shweta Kaur and my husband is Jaspal Singh, and that's it. Like, we don't ideally have any other surnames beyond that. A Kaur means a princess, Singh means a warrior, and ideally it should be for everything, every Sikh. It may look like we all are related, but that's how it is. Probably we are, we don't know. And the other concept is langar, which is a free vegetarian food for all. As I mentioned about the Vaisakhi celebration we did at High Street, so we did free food distribution to everyone to celebrate our festival. On regular basis, if you go to any Gurdwara, there will be a free vegetarian kitchen for everyone, irrespective of who is coming. Obviously, the only requirement is people cover their head. There is no influence of alcohol while someone enters the Gurdwara, which is a very common basic sense for, I believe, every other religion place. And then there are two things I would like to just point out here. Is a Sikh when is Amritdhari, which is similar to being a baptized Sikh, is they will follow certain rules and certain practices in their day-to-day life. I'm not a Amritdhari Sikh. I am not following those practices on a daily basis, although I strive to, although I wish to, and I want to be that, but I'm not there yet. But if it is an Amritdhari Sikh, they will do their prayers in the morning, they will do their prayers in the evening, they will have uncut hairs, they will be wearing their 5 Ks, which I talked about. Just move to the next slide, thank you. So there's very small pictures of the 5 Ks I've tried to put in there. The first one is of Kesh, as I mentioned, that we keep uncut hairs. One of the reasons is we were given the command to be as we are born, without being worried about how the appearance is, rather than that concentrate on inner self-development. So that's why we don't cut kesh. And then there's a kanga, which means a small comb, which is always worn inside the turban, or people carry it, which means that our appearance should be neat and clean. We should keep our hairs clean, and hygiene is very important. The other one is kara, which is something I'm wearing here, which is made of iron, and it symbolizes that God is infinite, and it's made of iron because that's probably one of the most purest form of metal. Then there is something called kachara, which means an undergarment. It's a specific design undergarment, which means every Sikh is expected to be ready for any situation in life. Probably in earlier times it was more important when there was more of wars and it was more of like a more difficult time to live in. The last one I would like to bring in highlight is Kirpan. Now that's one of the most controversial 5K is Kirpan is a small sword. I was hoping to bring in one of them today as a sample, but I forgot. It's it's very small. It's just very small. Just reading it, I don't want to go wrong on the size, but there is a particular size which is allowed legally for everyone to carry, even in airplanes, even in stadiums where there is sports or any sensitive political events. So that's like that dagger is a reminder for a Sikh. Sikh is, as I mentioned, Singh is a warrior. So that is for protecting anyone's right. It's not just for self-defense, it's for protecting others' right who can't stand up for themselves. Now, ideally, by principle, a Sikh is never supposed to raise the weapon for fighting or for destruction. That is only for protection and for self and for others. It's never meant to start a war or a fight. Now, I would move to something which is a little more on about Sikhs in UK. So we have had huge presence of Sikhs in UK, although we are probably one of the more towards the minority group compared to other different cultural backgrounds here in UK. But one of the first key important person who was a Sikh and had migrated to UK was Maharaja Dalip Singh Ji. He was the son of our king Maharaja Ranjit Singh Ji. He has there is a lot of historical evidences and his earlier own homes in Elwoodin. It is in Suffolk, in Thetford. So there is an annual event which happens there. So there is still some remains of his. I would say his like his house is sold, but it's still there. His grave is there. So that's like one of the key first Sikh who migrated to UK. It has been on record that from 1911 there have been Sikh Gurdwara, which was the first Sikh Gurdwara established in UK, and then around the partition of Punjab and during the World War, there was a wave of Sikhs which came into this country, and they were also called as the Black Prince, which was more of like the number of Sikhs, substantial number of Sikhs who were present in World War. And if you see the picture there, it's called the Khanda Poppy, which has been officially recognized by the Remembrance Day committee, which I usually wear on around the Remembrance Day, which is for Sikhs who fought in the World War. Coming to the topic of the day, as we mentioned, as I think Hannah was saying in the beginning of the session, is most of the hate crimes based on faith is due to ignorance. Now, I'm not going to go and read all of them because they are quite ugly. But that's just the list of some of the hate crimes Sikhs have been faced, which have been brought into notice of the media, which have been brought up. There have been either case fought against it, or there have been some talks about it in the media. One of the key ones I would say is like around 9/11, when there was, I think when there was huge attack on different faith people, Sikhs were attacked by saying they were one of the attackers, and there was a misidentity information going on. Irrespective of which identity we come from, obviously that is not something which should have happened, but we saw in UK after 9/11 the rise in hate crimes, faith-based hate crime towards Sikhs increased as well as towards other religion. So next slide, please. There is actually one mention here where me and my husband, we actually faced a bit of an experience of having the racist slur thrown at us, and I mentioned there about what it was and when it was, and it was like a first-hand experience which we never felt till that day. We were a few years into UK, and till that day I never felt that this could be real. It was always on TV, it was always in newspaper. That time it was not that much of social media around 9/11, but when we faced it the first time, I realized the intensity of it, the importance of speaking about it, the conversation, the awareness of it, the need for making it more aware. That's again some of the stats which I would like probably to move on, please. Yes. So talking about Sikhs in police, as we have this event specifically with distinguished guests here, is like we have had around 2,000 Sikhs in UK police serving, and that's an estimated figure which I have gathered. This is probably like 6 to 7 months old figures. I have not done change in the figures because I used this slide earlier with Essex Police last year. So I'm guilty of that. But we have distinguished two names here I would like to bring up, is like Charanpreet Singh and Colonel Chamandeep Singh, who have been given recognition and given promotion. They are due based on their performance and not because they have not been stopped because they are Sikh, they are turban wearing Sikhs. So it's not that there have been always hate against Sikhs. It's again the reason why I have two different contrast point slides is to present that if there have been hate, there have also been appreciation, and people have accepted us in a community. We have always also been loved. It's not that we've always got hate. But then again, it comes to how much the people are aware of it. If I don't know in this room, if I ask for raise of hand, if I ask, I'm not asking, but it's like how many of you knew about the appearance of Sikh? If this person is wearing turban and walking down the street, how many of you would you know if that's a Sikh or not? It's like, will you be scared of him? Will you be scared of that person? It's just that bringing out those conversations, making sure that everyone is aware of it right from an early age, and especially in an organization like police and military, because I think people look up to these organizations as someone who can protect them. And if there's an acceptance from these kind of department, I think it helps in a big way to all the smaller communities. Just on few points, I'm sure these are something which we all have already, I've not written something which is completely new or something, but I feel that some of the key aspects where we can work together as community between police and the faith groups is visibility and understanding on inclusion. One of the key things I've been telling around in my previous sessions as well with the Essex Police was mostly around having going to different schools and talking about it. And when that is done, having a Sikh police officer with you, which is like a real example, not just something on the picture, not just something on a video, but having someone who is from that religion to come and speak with you to the students at a younger age, which will stop bullying at schools. Because on my previous slides I did mention about a couple of incidents where school children were attacked because we keep unkept hairs. Hairs were attacked, they were made fun of, and there were specific words thrown at, which is a repeat of it. And it's not something which is happening just in Essex, that things have been happening all around the UK. And I think the only thing that can stop is awareness at younger age, awareness in all different aspects, and making sure that that is taken as a part of education and not just as a tick off, that okay, we are doing something for a faith group and then we do just a tick off activity. It should be included as a regular curriculum as much as important as a maths or a science subject is. I would say inclusivity is, again, as I mentioned, not just to tick off certain boxes, but to have it at a ground level, having people represent and talk. And then I think documentation. Documentation is something I would like to talk about in terms of also feeling the comfort of coming up to a police officer and reporting a hate crime. I mean, if I'm in Chelmsford, because I'm from Chelmsford, so if I'm in Chelmsford and if, God forbid, if someone from my community, a young person faces hate crime, how much is that child comfortable to come to the police and report it? Will the police already know, or will I have to show this PowerPoint slide and tell them what we are, who we are, and now why this attack or racial abuse or anything is important to be tackled? So if that confidence is there in the faith community that our local police, our country's police, defense, and everyone is aware of, there is, not that I'm not saying there's not, but I think we need some bit more of it. We need more time, more visibility of it. I know there are a couple of police groups in the police, and also there is a Sikh Defence, which is a huge group, and I have communicated with them earlier to understand what kind of support they get and what kind of activities they are doing. But I think it's probably not enough is a right word for me to say, rather than saying it doesn't exist. I think most important is like it's not enough for the kind of social media exposure today everyone have on all the platforms. And I think the one last point was there about the recruitment drive. I think, so we had in Kent this huge Gurdwara, and we had a festival for our annual celebration, and there was a defence stall there where they were recruiting, and people and small young kids were encouraged to come and talk to the police officers, to the defence personnel there. And I think something similar to that on smaller scale, maybe not only at annual events, but probably something like a walking day, an open day like we have for fire safety and something. So that's probably something I mean, as a group, we feel would help our youth to be feeling more comfortable to going and talking about it and being able to answer questions as well. That's it from me. I think the last slide is questions, but as Henna said, that we'll be taking it towards the end. I hope it was a good talk, and I'm going to be relieved now because I'm done.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Rita. And
that worked fine until we had something called the blood libel, which was a young boy in Norwich was killed on an Easter weekend in 1144. And 4 years later, somebody turned up and said it must have been the Jewish community, and said that must, because it was on Easter, they must have been using the blood of this young boy in their sort of reenaction of Christ's death as part of the Passover celebration. That's my understanding of it anyway. There'll be people in this audience actually who know more about this than me. But this was the first blood libel.
I'd now like to invite Jack Hudson to speak. It's really wonderful to hear about religions that maybe we know more about, perhaps, or we are more familiar with. Paganism is something that possibly some of us are less familiar with, so I'm really delighted that you're here, Jack, to tell us a little bit more. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you all for having me. It's an honour and a privilege to represent paganism. It's played a massive part in my life and my development, especially from being an angry young man. And I'm going to give you a talk about paganism and a little bit more about heathenry. I think some of you will only know heathen as a term that your mother might have called you once or twice when you were misbehaving, and a couple of the challenges that my community face. So, what is paganism? Well, paganism, contrary to popular opinion, is not a religion in and of itself. No, indeed, it is in fact an umbrella term, and an umbrella which multiple religions are categorised. What people know as mythologies are in fact religious stories. They were and are still part of living traditions. The gods of these stories were and still are worshipped by their pagan followers the world over, by their own religions such as heathenry, Wicca, Druidry, Remover, witchcraft, shamanism, just to name a few. And much like with Christianity and Islam, within those religions are subsects. The gods are the same, but the interpretations and their teachings and stories are approached differently. The values vary and different aspects of the religious tenets are approached differently. Heathenry, a pagan religion that is primarily focused on the worship of Germanic gods, has multiple religious denominations such as Alcatru, Fallen Seth, Theodism and Odinism, but we will get to Odinism later on. Pagan religions take shape rooted in polytheism, animism, shamanism and in some instances monotheism. They are religions of idol worship and spiritual and the mundane. They focus on the individual and collective expression of faith. They are religions with a profound respect for nature and living things. A belief in the physical and the unseen. Many pagan religions consider themselves free of dogma or scriptural dictate, where the needs of the individual are as important as the community. Pagan religions were once widely spread across the world from ancient Greece and Rome to Persia in the east and Scandinavia in the north. A beautiful mosaic of overlapping traditions and practices, mixing and blending with one another, as cultures often do when confronted with each other. The coming of the Abrahamic monotheistic religions changed all of that, and a 1,000-year struggle for spiritual domination took place in the continents of Europe, Asia and Africa. As the ruling classes and social elites of the pagan world converted to religions such as Christianity and Islam, the pagan populace found themselves on the receiving end of forced conversion, religious violence, and the legal suppression of their cultural and religious beliefs. The end result was a mass decline in pagan religions across the world. Our temples were destroyed, pillaged and ruined, our stories and practices forgotten, abandoned and lost to the confines of history. Our gods and spirits reduced to the protagonists of children's bedtime stories and folklore. Many of our holidays and festivals are absorbed into the emerging dominant cultures, such as Yule, Christmas, or Yostra, Easter. For the next 1,000 years, if any pagan traditions had survived, they were much diminished. Our surviving recorded history, written down hundreds of years after the conversion era, by Christians and for a Christian audience. This happened 1,000 years ago. No one is alive that remembers those times, but the history of it and the subsequent treatment of pagans, in particular witches, is still felt in the hearts and minds of pagans today. The vast majority of pagans feel misunderstood, misrepresented in modern media, and are often openly mocked for their beliefs by the general populace in Great Britain today. So what does paganism look like today? Well, according to the 2021 census, there are over 150,000 people practicing various pagan religions in the United Kingdom today. Pagans grow out of the ground, as the YouTuber and pagan commentator Ocean Keltoy has stated, with second-generation pagans being rare and third generations even rarer. Although this is changing now, with many pagan children growing up in the security of their communities. The Enlightenment period has benefited mankind in so many ways, and paganism has been a great benefactor. In Britain, pagan religions have been undergoing a great revival since the 18th century, first with Neo-Druidism taking shape and later Druidic orders forming in the Victorian societies. Their orders, practices and traditions have survived until today. There are now roughly 2,500 practicing Druids in the UK. Their holy orders have land and groves in which they practice their faith. Wicca, one of the largest and best known and more modern pagan religions in Great Britain, is a blend of witchcraft and multiple pagan pantheons. It was introduced by Gerald Gardner in 1954. There are over 13,000 Wiccans in the United Kingdom today. Overall, there are nearly 80,000 people in the United Kingdom who consider themselves a generic pagan, often blending their culture into the understanding of the gods, spirits and nature. In 2021, the census also showed a remarkable growth in shamanism, at nearly 8,000 people identifying as shamans. And then there's heathenry. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about heathenry as the chairman of the largest heathen organisation in the UK. It's a subject that I'm best qualified to talk about, and later on the problems that we face today. Heathenry is one of the fastest growing pagan religions, and our numbers have increased by 140% in the past decade. Heathen belief is broken down into three main parts: the worship of the gods, the gifting cycle with the whites, or you would know them as spirits, and the veneration of our ancestors. You would know our gods today thanks mainly to Marvel superhero films, Odin, Thor, Loki. It's an umbrella term for multiple heathen religions, and they were practiced regionally before the conversion era in Europe. The gods are the same or similar, with linguistic variations due to regional and cultural practice. Today there are roughly 5,000 heathens in the United Kingdom, with the first heathen organisation forming in the 1970s, known as the Odinic Rite, and later splitting into the Odinic Fellowship also. Both organisations practice what is known to heathens today as folkism. We'll get onto folkism later when we discuss the problems that paganism faces. In 2013, Alsatry was founded, the organisation of which I'm proud to call myself the chairperson. Our aims are simple: to create a safe and inclusive space for heathens and pagans to worship the gods and to educate people in our religious practices. We do not yet own land or have temples, but it is the sincere aim to provide them in order for inclusive heathens in the UK to practice their religion freely and safely. So what problems and discrimination do pagans face today? Well, the internet has benefited paganism massively in the last 2 decades. It's allowed for pagans to find one another, having mainly spent their lives in isolation, unaware of other pagans nearby, with whom they can practice their faith together. But the internet has also highlighted the levels of misunderstanding, discrimination, and sometimes open hatred directed at pagans. The 1980s Satanic Panic has been a major contributing factor to anti-pagan discrimination, with many people ignorant of the differences between pagans and Satanists. often causing hurt and upset by making inflammatory remarks or outright refusal to communicate or work with pagans because of their deeply held Christian or Muslim or atheist beliefs. This is rare in the UK, but in America it's still prevalent. There have been cases, and one of which is ongoing, where a heathen's religion has been used as a reason to deny him access to his children, and a subsequent legal battle is being pursued. Today, pagans are still faced with open mockery in certain national newspapers. An article was written about the launch of the Defence Pagan Network, the military body representing serving pagans. And that was met with open mockery in one article published by The Sun, and another online calling all pagans perverts. When the Police Pagan Association was launched in 2009, an article in the Daily Mail brushed off all pagans as spellcrafters, mocking and demonstrating a distinct lack in any journalistic self-educating before publishing the article. The general ignorance and a few poorly researched and written newspaper articles are not the cause of most of the discrimination and fear that pagans feel today. No, it's from within, and a deep misunderstanding from without that causes pagans, in fact most heathens, to look over their shoulders in fear. And I'm sorry to mention this here, but to put it simply, we have a Nazi problem in paganism. Since the Volkisch movement began in the 19th century in Germany, there has been a deliberate and purposeful use of ancient pagan symbology, and our symbols and our gods are utilised, often in an attempt to credit and give validation to white supremacist ideology and rhetoric. Today, it takes shape in the form of folkism and Odinism, and it is growing. Earlier, as I mentioned, the first two heathen organisations to form in the UK, the Odinic Rite and the Odinist Fellowship, both practice a form of heathenry known as Odinism. First coined in the 1930s, Australia, Odinism is an ethnocentric ideology believing that their brand of paganism is the true religion of ethnic European peoples. The Odinist groups in the UK typically claim they are the true religion of the indigenous English, and the only white males and females can practice paganism under the banner of Odinism. Nationalists, racists and fascists in the UK are well documented for wearing pagan symbology and sporting tattoos of the runes, Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, the Valknut, and of course the swastika. These ancient symbols are also worn and sported by the vast majority of my community, who are peaceful and inclusive, anti-racist pagans. However, the average person in the street cannot differentiate the difference between a folkish pagan and a normal, inclusive pagan. It can often lead to disagreement, accusation, and in some worst-case scenarios, aggression and violence. The Police Pagan Association spends an abnormal amount of time trying to correct misrepresentations of pagan iconography in the modern media, in government studies published, and of course in newspaper articles that almost always point out that pagan symbology is worn by Nazis and the far right. Our fear is that this misrepresentation of our symbology and the use of paganism as a way of describing the symbols slaps a target on our backs for vigilante anti-racist groups. Not to mention that the far right also despise us, calling us plagans and LARPers, or live-action role players. Whilst our symbology is used and bastardised by the far right, and the media continues to misrepresent their usage, pagans will not feel safe or comfortable. This is a new type of discrimination that we face, and yet it echoes much of the old discrimination faced by pagans throughout history. A distinct lack of understanding in our beliefs, at times disregard for our personal and religious freedoms, and outright mockery and aggression born of ignorance and a willingness to ignore the evidence before them. Pagan religions are beautiful. Pagan people are on the whole like any other religious group. We are parents, brothers and sisters, friends and family, we're old and young. We are a mixed background of ethnicities, genders and sexualities. We worship our gods and we work with our spirits. We do not want to harm anyone or be harmed by anyone. We're thankful for the lives the gods have gifted us and the communities we live in. And so interfaith networking is vital to helping us survive and flourish, whilst helping other faiths to grow and flourish here in the UK also. Cohesion and unity is so essential to the human experience while we're here on Midgard, Earth. So I'll finish with my favourite stanza from Havanor, the sayings of Odin. Young was I once, I walked alone, and bewildered seemed in the way. Then I found me another, and rich I thought me, for man is the joy of man. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jack. That was really enlightening, certainly for myself. And it's so interesting to hear that actually, so many religions share so many of the experiences, in the sense of, religion being used as a reason to hate, religion being used, as a reason to discriminate, and even within a religion as well, which, many of us know, and between religions. So thank you so much for enlightening us on that. That's really wonderful. It's really wonderful to see and hear such a buzz in the room. I'm really glad that conversation has sparked. It's a great opportunity for us to meet new people, so thank you. Without further ado, really, I'm going to invite Sidra Naeem to the stage to talk about Islam and her experiences. Sidra is involved in many different organisations and initiatives, and particularly interested in networking and bringing interfaith to the fore. So thank you, Sidra.
Thank you very much, everybody, for inviting me today, and it's a privilege to be here. I will be talking to you about faith hate in relation to Islam. And Islam currently actually is the largest religion that faces hate, unfortunately, especially since 9/11, which I will be coming to in a minute. But first of all, if we look at the word Islamophobia, the word Islamophobia alone creates fear, because what does Islamophobia mean? Phobia means fear, fear of Islam. So just that word alone is enough, really, which causes a great big stigma against Islam. Did you know that there has always been hate against Islam, right from when it first came? So I'm going to take you through the faith hate through the ages first, right from the Middle Ages to present day, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the current situation, 9/11, terrorism, all those taboo words. Okay, so here we go. So here is a history of Islam, and on this chart you will see all the religions, and you will see that Islam is actually the last monotheistic religion out of all the monotheistic religions. So already it is like a rival religion. So the moment it came, it was like, what's that other monotheistic religion? We're the best monotheistic religion. So already, it is a rival. There's rivalry there. The sound is working. Okay, does anybody know in which century Islam came to Britain? Any ideas? You can pop your hands up. I am a teacher by profession, so I like engaging with the audience. You can have a guess. Yes?
1400s.
Okay, it was much earlier than that. It was actually 750 AD is when Islam came to Britain. And if you look at, that's the stages, and Islam came to the ports of Britain. Mainly merchants came to sell their goods, spices, clothes, oil, perfumes, silk, things like that, spices. And they were only allowed to go up to the port area. Mainly Suffolk, Brighton are some of the ports where some Arabic coins have been found, and it was actually the Moors, and it was there that they exchanged inventions as well across the ports and their goods. But however, they were not allowed to stay in Britain, so they were only allowed to stay like homeless people just on the roads until they finished their goods, sold all their goods, and their ships were, boats were empty, and then they had to go back again. A lot of their inventions were actually written out of British history and assigned to other people who had learnt about the inventions through these Muslims that had come to the ports. So if you look up the Golden Age of Islam, or if you go to some museums, the Science Museum, you'll learn that a lot of the inventions that we actually, live with today were actually made by Muslims, but they were written out of the history books. They were not given the credit. Okay, going down the ages, the Crusades was a very big moment in history where the Muslims were hated and it created friction between Christians and Muslims. Salahuddin is quite a famous figure in Islam, and he is actually portrayed really badly in European history. When the Quran came through the ports, it was not allowed to be published in public. It was only allowed to be published within the churches, and that was it. It was not allowed to go out in public. And when it did, it was all completely changed to create hate. So there were all kinds of things written in there which then made people hate Islam. The very first Englishman, John Nelson, who is written down in books to be the earliest Englishman to convert to Islam, he actually had to pretend that he was a Turk. So it was the Ottoman Empire at the time, and his life was actually endangered, and he had to pretend he was Turk and that he could not speak English, and he put a turban on just so that he was not attacked or killed. And there's many, many stories. This is actually a pirate, Captain John Ward of Kent. He also became Muslim just through liaising through the Moors at the ports, and he had to actually go, he was evacuated out of Britain, and he had to go and live in Tunisia. So that was actually the stage at the time. This, I think, is a really, really important newspaper article that was published from years ago in 1649, which looks at all the different faiths that were actually living in London at the time, all the different sects. And it actually tells you that all of which the first are most devilish and damnable. So every other faith apart from Protestant was classed as devilish and damnable. And that reference is actually from the British Museum. So everything I've put up, everything is referenced. Okay, and then the slaves. We look at the 18th century, we're looking at the slaves. Did you know that above 90% of the original slaves, which went around the whole of the world, were actually originally Muslims? And you just need to look at the film Roots. I don't know if anybody has watched the film Roots. And in there, they show the origins of all the slaves being Muslims. And we already know all the discrimination and all the, problems, how they were treated, not given any money for all the work that they did, and, treated really, really badly. We know that as well. Okay, going down the ages, William Henry Quilliam was actually a very famous Englishman who became Muslim, and he opened the very first mosque. And this was just sort of creeping up towards Queen Victoria's time. So I'm going to put up a video now, and it's actually a BBC video, and you can have a look at what happened.
A century ago, Liverpool was a flourishing port, and Muslim sailors from India and the Far East would have been regular visitors. This rather faded terraced house in a Liverpool suburb is where this forgotten story of Islam begins. Although it doesn't look much now, in the 19th century, this was the first mosque in England. In 1889, the house was bought by a man named Abdullah Henry Quilliam. Quilliam was a Victorian gentleman, but he was also a Muslim convert, a religious innovator who fought to change preconceptions of Islam at a time when society found it frightening and alien. And it was here that he set about doing it. Against the odds, Quilliam established this not only as a mosque, but as a flourishing Muslim institute with its own printing press and an orphanage. It was the centre of Islam not just for Liverpool, but for the whole of Britain.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
But this public display of devotion to Islam immediately put him on a collision course with both the Christian hierarchy and the people of Liverpool.
Quilliam faced hostility right from the very beginning. They were attacked on a number of occasions. You get pigs' heads being thrown into the mosque.
They would congregate mobs outside the mosque who would start jeering. It raised hackles, there's no doubt about that.
In the face of such opposition, the mosque seemed to have an uneasy future. Quilliam's genius was to analyse why Victorians despised Islam and begin to address their prejudice. Quilliam knew that one of the key criticisms against Islam was that it was narrow-minded. It didn't embrace the new scientific discoveries of the 19th century. These lectures met such criticisms head-on.
So he's presenting Islam in a very rational way that's going to appeal, in a sense, to the new scientific consciousness of Victorian Britain.
These events drew converts, and as numbers grew, so did Quilliam's profile. But just as Quilliam was at the height of his success, everything changed. In June 1908, he and his eldest son left on what was supposed to be a 6-week trip to Istanbul. No one knows exactly why, but without any warning, they mysteriously disappeared.
After some months, his youngest son, who stays behind, begins to dismantle everything that Abdullah Quilliam had created. The properties are sold, and effectively the Liverpool Muslim community comes to an end.
With the disintegration of Quilliam's mosque, the outlook for Islam in Britain appeared uncertain.
Okay, so we're going to carry on now. So this was actually somebody called Abdul, and he was actually the Queen's secretary, Queen Victoria's secretary. I don't know if anybody has seen the film Victoria and Abdul. And in there they, talk about how loyal he was to the Queen and everything. But at the end, as soon as the Queen passed away, he was treated really, really badly, and he was expelled back to India after her death. Okay, and then we go down to the ages, we can rapidly move on. There was actually no law against Islamophobia, so people can say exactly what they like and nothing is done about it. But, however, there was a law against race hate. So race hate crime laws started off from 1965 onwards, and the problem we had there was that people couldn't attack other people for their race, but they could still attack them for their religion. So that is where we saw an increase in Muslims being attacked for their religion. And unfortunately, a lot of Muslims are people of colour, because if you look at the Middle East where Islam started, people have got this added problem of having a colour as well as the religion. So this was, in a way, people's way of attacking Islam, even though they couldn't attack them for the colour. We're looking at so many different types of people here, National Front and things like that. I did actually live through this era myself, however I didn't come across any Islamophobia yet, not yet anyway. Then the biggest genocide really that happened was in the Bosnian region, which a lot of people know about, but those genocides are still happening, yet they're not televised enough. So we know, for example, there is so much, problems with Muslims happening in India, in China, in Holland. The Qurans are being burnt. There's banning of hijab in France and places like Holland as well. So it's still ongoing. However, it's not really televised enough. So a lot of mainstream media do not know about all of these things that are going on. And then the next catastrophe we come up to is 9/11. 9/11 was actually a very big point in my life where I saw everything. So I'm going to just tell you my own experience really. I was not a practicing Muslim. I didn't class myself as a practicing Muslim. And I lived in London all my life where there were so many people who were Muslim. So I never ever felt my religion in any way whatsoever. I moved to Brentwood, into a village, very white British English village. Again, no problems at all. People used to ask me, what religion are you? And I would say, I'm Muslim. Nobody even batted an eyelid. And then 9/11 happened. And the day 9/11 happened, I was too scared to come out of the house. I was embarrassed. And that day, it happened at lunchtime. I saw the news and I had to go and collect my children from school. They were very, very small at that stage. And I went to collect them from school and I noticed nobody was talking to me. All my friends, all of a sudden, they stopped talking to me. And I didn't really understand it because I thought, well, I didn't do that, did I? You know, so it was really, really scary. And then during that week, again, people were not talking to me. And one of the ladies said to me in the playground, you know 9/11 happened, don't you? And you know that was Muslims. And that's when it struck me that that is why they're not talking to me. And then by the end of that week, somebody said to me, what religion are you again? What religion did you say you were again? And I said, Islam. And it was, Islam? Is that the religion where you walk 10 foot behind your husband? And all of a sudden, all these things started coming out. And I thought, hang on a minute, that doesn't happen in my family, is that right? More like the other way around. I walk 10 foot in front of my husband and he's 10 foot behind me. So this is actually, this forced me then to look into my religion and find out, is this true or is this just the media? And I actually then found out that none of it was true. Muslim women are not oppressed, they actually were liberated, and the religion has been far advanced than other religions. So that is what brought me to Islam, and that's when I started to cover and became a practicing Muslim. It was actually 9/11 that made me do that. So some of the big stigma things which I found was, first of all this killing, all this terrorism is all political. It is not the religion. Tell me which religion goes out and tells you to kill. All religions are about peace and harmony. The word Islam actually means peace. Okay, so it's inhumane to go out and kill. So it's all political. It's about land, power and money. That's what all the bad in the world is all about. You know, that's what people are trying to do, is to get hold of land and power and money and top positions. But it's not about the religion. Anybody who's practicing their religion would not do any of that. So in Islam it says if anyone kills an innocent person, it would be as if he has killed the whole of mankind. And if he saves one person, it's like saving the whole of mankind. I also found that Muslims are not allowed to engage in suicide bombing, because that's killing people. But also we're a strong belief in destiny, where we believe that if God made you, it's up to him to take you away. You cannot take the life into your own hands and then get rid of your own self, and not only that, then kill others as well. And also, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, our Prophet, actually said, do not be extreme. Be in the middle way. Do not be extreme. Many nations have been destroyed before you, only because of extremism in religion. So we know that it cannot have come from Islam. The Quran also says, keep to the right course. Keep to the middle path. Okay? Do not be extreme. And he also said, do not cause harm nor respond to harm with harm. So on the whole, terrorism does not have any religion. And if we think about ISIS and we think about all these terrorist groups, how many Muslims have they killed? So if they were really Muslim, why are they killing Muslims then? So did you know there were thousands and thousands of Muslims that were actually killed in Syria and in all the other places, Afghanistan and Iraq and all those places. So terrorism actually has no religion. And we know that from the New Zealand attacks that happened, the big mosque that got attacked, and that was not a Muslim person. Okay, there was a recent one. There was a Syrian Arab, and everybody thought he was Muslim, and he was televised as Muslim. And then it was found that he wasn't Muslim. He was actually Christian. And all of a sudden, you never heard about it again in the news. So it is actually televised as well in the wrong way. We get a really bad press. So terrorists can be any ethnicity and any religion. Muslims are not the face of terrorism, they are not a threat. Terrorists are, okay? And also, the other little cartoon I've got there is actually how the media portrays it, and journals have actually been written on this. If any Arab or Muslim does it, it's terrorism straight away. If a black person does something, they're thugs. And if a white person does it, all of a sudden it's mental health. So, that is the way it is nowadays, The biggest problem we've got is there is no law against Islamophobia, so people can say what they like. It's freedom of speech. And so this is where we get all the problems with the Charlie Hebdo magazines and things. People can't do anything about it and then they retaliate. So, all of this really, the picture up there is all about really Charlie Hebdo and things like that. The other really big taboo word beginning with a J, does anybody know about it? Anybody here? Jihad. Jihad, good, you got it all. See, you've heard it all, haven't you? Now, did you know that that is a very, very misunderstood and overused word? Did you know that the word jihad just means struggle? We all struggled to get here today in the rain, or we struggled in the traffic. Smiling in tough times is jihad. Being patient in hard times is jihad. Taking care of your old parents is jihad. So it just means strive and struggle, which the media has overinflated. You do get this a lot with the Quran. You get a couple of words which they will take out of the Quran without looking at the context, and it blows way out of proportion. And you think, hang on a minute, that verse was revealed when this was going on. So this is how also terrorists work as well. The ones who want their own way, they take bits out of the Quran and they blow it out of proportion to suit themselves. But that is not, they have not understood the Quran properly because they've taken it completely out of context. And I know this happens with other religions as well. So I've got a quick video on about jihad, since you all know about it. And you can just have a quick listen.
Jihad in the news is often translated to mean holy war, but holy and war are both English words with Latin origins, so it probably doesn't mean exactly that. According to Google Translate, the individual words exist separately in Arabic. So what is jihad? Does it refer to a set of conflicts, like how the Crusades refer to a set of Christian holy wars? Nope, it does not. So why do they need the extra word jihad to describe a holy war? Does it even mean holy war at all? Well, the short answer is no. What jihad really means is struggle. It's a major religious duty that many consider to be the unofficial sixth pillar of Islam, right below self-control, giving to the poor, and visiting Mecca. Technically, jihad means a struggle in the way of Allah. Fringe radical militant groups think that attacking the West is part of that struggle, but the majority of Muslims don't. Most of them are actually opposed to using the word jihad in that way because it associates the word with terrorism. So what does jihad mean to them? Well, in Islam, there are two types of jihad, the outer and the inner. The outer is the kind that defends Islam against outside aggression, like they did in the Crusades. The inner represents the internal spiritual struggle to seek self-improvement in the way of Allah. So basically, it's the struggle to be a better Muslim, both spiritually and in practice. The following passage, which is from a highly debated Islamic text called the Hadith, sums it up pretty nicely. In it, Muhammad says to a band of returning warriors who have come from the lesser jihad to the greater jihad, the striving of a servant of Allah against his own desires. So despite the negative attention it gets, jihad can refer to some really wonderful things. There's even a website called myjihad.org that highlights good jihads, and it's part of an entire online movement devoted to taking the word back from Islamic extremists. Even Twitter has gotten in on it with a hashtag #myjihad, where people tweet about their good deeds or positive struggles to help better themselves and their communities. Like, my jihad is to balance work and family life. My jihad is to challenge society norms and work towards improving our culture. My jihad is to keep the air in my country clean. And finally, my jihad is trying to appreciate the jihad in a place where the jihad is misunderstood. So see, it's really not as scary a word as you might think. It doesn't mean holy war, and if that hashtag is any indication, it has the power to change the world.
Hopefully that would have dispelled that myth for you all. And just moving on now to the media, which I think is a really, really big problem. So if you look at that picture, that is a very powerful picture really that shows you how the media can work. Not all media though, because I have had, you know, some really good media reports on Islam as well. So sometimes Islam is intentionally misrepresented. Some politicians, religious leaders, and media have found an ideal scapegoat in Islam. By associating Islam with the inhumane acts of a handful, they have been successful in driving a larger number of people to vote for them, read their newspapers, and watch their television programs. If you look at something like EastEnders, if it's a lovely, wonderful story, the ratings go down. And if it's full of a murder happens in there or something bad happens in there, all of a sudden the ratings go up, do they not? So this is how the media can work. So Muslims being terrorists sells papers, okay? And I have got first-hand experience of this. Whenever I do something good, I try and put it in the newspapers to try and change the perception of Muslims. And I do a lot of good out there. And I mean, one thing in particular, which I do remember very clearly, is when I went to Buckingham Palace and met Her Majesty the late Queen. And I thought, you know, this is something really good. You know, I went there because of all the lovely voluntary work I was doing. And I thought, I must tell the newspapers so that the image of Islam can get better. Well, did they put it in the newspaper? No. I waited. Every week I complained. And then the manager came on the phone and I said, look, can you tell me please, why am I not going in the newspaper? You've got just a silly little teacher in assembly was on there shaking hands with someone. And I thought, well, if they can put that on, great big front page news, why can't they put me on with the Queen? And she said, no, love, she said, because good news is no news. And I got really upset about that. I thought that's really bad, because if I had told you that I saw a terrorist on Brentwood High Street, I'd be front page news within seconds. That's what I said to her. And then guess what? The next week I was in the newspapers. So it did work. But this is first-hand experience again. So by associating Islam with humane acts of a handful, they've been successful in driving larger numbers of people to vote for them, read their newspapers, watch their television programs. I've got actually a tabloid guide to running a gunman story there, so you can have a look at that. So this is actually what the world thinks about us, that we're all terrorists, and this is actually what we are, and this is actually what we do. So that is actually, you know, what we do. And I also just wanted to point out at the end that whenever a terrorist activity comes about, it affects us the most, because all of a sudden we're too scared to go out. There's been acid attacks. Whenever there was the Manchester bombing that happened, there were acid attacks that week on Muslims. And I was so scared to go out, and I had to go out to get a prescription. And you know, that day, I took my hijab off. May God forgive me for this one. I had to take my hijab off, and I put a hat on, and then I went out, because I felt I couldn't do it, because I was worried that I was going to get attacked. And I also want to point out that whenever a terrorist activity happens, a good majority of the people that are killed are Muslim as well. So for example, you know, the London bombings and things, well, the majority of London are actually Muslims. So Muslims get killed as well, you know, and Manchester, there are a lot of Muslims in Manchester. So we need to sort of keep that in mind as well. But I'll deal with all the rest in the questions. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sidra, for highlighting all of that. Finally, last but not least, I have Anna here from the Church of Latter-day Saints to tell us about her experience and a bit more about faith. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for letting me come along to talk to you. Initially, when I said I'd do this, I thought, well, do we really belong here? I've heard so much now about other people who have experienced such terrible persecution and hate crime. I thought, do we really? But then I got here and Sidra said to me, oh yeah, Mormons, there's stigma against you as well, isn't there? You say you're Mormon and people go, whoo. And I thought, maybe we're not to go here. So I want to start off by asking a little bit about what do you know about Mormons? What do you, when somebody says that, what do you think? What do you know? Do you maybe think of very smartly dressed men in suits who knock on your door, maybe stop you in the street and want to talk to you about their religion? Or do you maybe think about polygamy? And think about one man having lots of wives and maybe they all dress funny? Or if you're of a certain generation, do you think about the Ottomans, Donnie and Marie? Or if you're of a maybe more recent generation, do you think about a successful, very irreverent West End musical? Obviously, this is not really what we're all about, and I just want to say as well, we don't practice polygamy. So this is our local church. This is the Southend Chapel, and this is, you'll know it, it's on the A127 in Lee, just by the speed camera. So when you see it, so I'll tell you a little bit about the church. It was founded in New York State in 1830 by just 6 people, and now has 17 million members worldwide. Actually, most likely. So we identify as a broadly Christian denomination, but we know we have differences from other Christian churches. We identify as Christian because we follow Jesus Christ. We call ourselves disciples of Christ, or saints, as the early church used to call themselves. And we follow the Bible, we follow Jesus' teachings, but we have different doctrines in some areas. We're non-Trinitarian, and we believe in ongoing revelation, so we have additional scripture to the Bible. And other Christian denominations don't like that, and that's why we have the stigma. I'm trying to read my slides. We have no paid ministry. Now, my role in the church, I'm one of the youth leaders, but I don't get paid for doing that. The bishop who runs the ward, he doesn't get paid for doing that. Debbie, who's here, has just been released from the State Relief Society presidency, so that's quite an important calling she had. She didn't get paid for doing that either, did you? No. Yeah, we don't get paid for it, so nobody gets paid for anything. And possibly because of that, maybe, we are the richest church in the world. However, when I was researching this, I thought, oh, we used to be the richest, are we still? Yes, we're the richest church in the world, despite only having 17 million members. But part of that is because when I was researching it, we're a global church and we count it all as one entity, whereas the second richest church in the world, for example, is the Catholic Church in Italy. And the third richest is the Catholic Church in Spain, and so on. So it's you know, other churches are often separate, and that's possibly why we're the richest church in the world. And what that does mean is that we do a lot of charity and humanitarian work because we have the money to do it. We specialise, as with any sort of humanitarian work, you have to specialise in certain areas, otherwise everybody's doing the same thing and you're not benefiting everybody. The areas we specialise in are disaster relief, ATMIT, I don't know if you've ever heard of ATMIT, it's a particularly nutritious porridge, it's used to treat malnutrition. Wheelchairs, measles vaccines and water, and those are the big things that we do worldwide, but we also have lots of charity and humanitarian projects in different areas. What else did I know? Oh yes, some quirks about us. We don't drink tea or coffee, we don't drink alcohol, we don't smoke tobacco or use tobacco in any way, we don't do illegal drugs, and we don't gamble. We have a particular health code that we try and follow. And it has been discovered by scientists that because we follow that health code, we live 7 years longer than the average population. Or somebody once told me, no, it just feels like longer. So I thought I'd have a bit of fun with Google. And what did I say? Oh, why are Mormons? And I like that the top one came up, why are Mormons so nice? I don't know if you can read all those, I'm not sure I can either. But I'm going to stand here as testimony to you that the why are Mormons rich, why are Mormons in Utah, and why is the Mormon church so secretive are not correct. I am not rich, I'm not projecting myself as a hologram from Utah, and I'm here to tell you all about it, which isn't very secretive, is it? So, but I will focus on the bit that says, why are Mormons called Mormons? Because that's not the name of our church. Our church is called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it's really important to us that we are recognised as being called that because it's got the name of Jesus Christ in it, and we want to be identified as followers of Jesus Christ. However, Mormon was a chap who lived in the 4th century AD. He, I suppose, abridged or collated all the records of his people going back centuries and created a book of his records called the Book of Mormon, and that's one of our books of scripture because it's about the religious dealings of his people over the centuries. Because we use that as scripture as well, people call us Mormons. I will admit it's also catchier. I went to an ecumenical service a while ago at Thundersley Congregational Church, and I remember the pastor introducing welcoming everybody and saying, we're Thundersley Congregational Church. We like to call ourselves the Beacon, because Thundersley Congregational Church is a bit of a mouthful. It's got 9 syllables. I said, 9. So that's why people call us Mormons. We know what you mean, that's fine. Now, there is a reason I volunteered for the church to represent the church here today. And this is because I was one of the persecutors. I used to persecute my own church that I don't do now. So this, I know you can't all see it, but this is a picture of me, looking slightly younger than I do now, with my husband, now ex-husband, on the day of the ordination into the Anglican priesthood. So I was a vicar's wife, I was a curate's wife for several years. My best friend joined the Mormon church, and I was absolutely devastated. I thought she had been brainwashed into a cult. And I spent years trying to find out everything I could about the church to get her out of it. So there's a newspaper article about the work that I was doing, and I published a booklet about how to get people out of the Mormon church and how to stop people joining the Mormon church and why the Mormon church is such a bad thing. As you might have guessed, I did not stick to that view. I have changed my opinions. I've now been a member of the church for 30 years, so, you know, I like to think I've done my penance. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit now about the sort of persecution that we experience, not just from me, but, you know, from other people. This picture is the pioneers. I don't know if you could see it, but it's a lot of people in old-fashioned clothes, because this was the 1840s, trekking across desert and across the wastelands of America. And this was the famous Mormon pioneers. It's part of American history. What happened was, and I shall have to probably read this, I think, from my notes. The church expanded very rapidly. So in 1830 it was set up with 6 people, and by 1833 there were 3,000 in little communities all over the east of America. People did not like the Mormons right from the beginning because it was new and it was scary. And they were quite suspicious. There were things they didn't like about them. So, for example, the church didn't permit members to own slaves. Anybody joining the church had to release their slaves, and that was not something the Southern states were very happy about. Some of them practiced polygamy. About 20% of people did practice polygamy in those times. They believed that because the Mormons were led by a prophet, they would vote whatever the prophet told them to do. And they would vote with lock, and that would upset the democracy of the area. It's not actually true, it's never been true. And they also blamed the financial crash of the 1830s on the Mormons. So I'm not sure how that worked. Anyway, they didn't like them. And there was lots of persecution. So the saints tried to build communities where they could live in peace, but they were attacked quite frequently. There was tarrings and featherings, there were murderings. Now this was the Wild West. And we kind of gave as good as we got on some occasions. We weren't brilliant. But it was quite an unpleasant way of life. And so we regularly moved about, these communities regularly moved about to try and protect themselves from their buildings being destroyed and from all the things that were happening. And this is you probably can't see it, but it's a copy of the extermination order issued by Governor Lilburn W. Boggs, who was the governor of Missouri. And the text on it, I'll read it from my screen, the Mormons must be treated as enemies and must be exterminated or driven from the state if necessary for the public peace. And that was 1838 that he issued the extermination order saying, please exterminate any Mormons you come across. So obviously we moved. So they all got together and moved and built their own city a little bit further west called Nauvoo, which was all very well until it all started again and people got very upset about it again. And it actually culminated in Joseph Smith, who was the prophet, and his brother being locked in a jail and then being murdered by a mob. And at that point, they just said, right, this is it. So oops, I've gone backwards. So they trekked 1,000 miles west, putting hand carts, sometimes they had ox carts, but loaded everything they had into these carts and walked 1,000 miles to Utah. It was, at the time, it was desert, it was Indian, it still is desert, but it was Indian territory. They wanted a land nobody else was going to want. Nobody would follow them there. It was inhospitable, it was unpleasant. They would be safe. So they trekked 1,000 miles west. They set up Salt Lake City, and that's why Salt Lake City is still the headquarters of the church today, and Utah has such a high percentage of Mormons, and that's where Mormon comes from. So that's our persecution history, if you like. Persecution has continued to a certain extent, not quite the extent it was today, but we're still misunderstood, I think. We are, I related quite closely to what Jack was saying, we are mocked. People don't understand us. People have all these ideas that are wrong. So particularly it's other Christians, sad to say. We do have distinct doctrines, we know this, but other Christians often don't want us to join in. So if you have groups of local towns, churches getting together in local towns, we often will either not be invited, or we ask to be included, we won't be included. They often don't want to include us in anything. A friend of mine, her husband actually started an app, a Christian dating app, which has been very successful. And so I went to have a look, she said, oh, it's doing really well. And their terms say, you can't be in this app if you're a woman. Things like that. And my personal experiences, which one of them was about 20 years ago when I was living in Wales. I was living in the absolute middle of nowhere in very rural Wales, little village. I had joined the church at that point, but I wasn't able to attend the Mormon church because there wasn't one in my area. It was too far away to get to. So I attended, because I could not go to church on Sunday, that would be bizarre. So I attended the local evangelical family church. And I had friends there. I was never secret about who I was or why I was there. I said, this isn't my church. Oh, good, it's church, I'll have fun, it's great, the music was good. And I also attended their Bible study. Can't remember what evening of the week it was, but once a week to the Bible study. I remember we were working our way through Isaiah. And that was all well and good until a new pastor came along, and he pulled me to one side one day and said, I'd like you to not come to the Bible study anymore. I said, why not? He said, I think it's giving the wrong idea. And I was so taken aback, I didn't ask what idea it was giving, but I assumed he didn't want me to go to the church anymore either, so I stopped going. But I still remember all these years later thinking I wasn't allowed to go to their church. That was a while ago, but more recently, about 6-7 years ago, I was youth leader then as well. I seem to have been running youth for ages. I wanted to take our youth group on a holiday. Lots of people, get their youth to go off and they do camping and things like that. I don't do camping. So I found a nice, lovely building. It was a converted church, owned by another church that had dormitories and rooms for leaders and everything we needed. It was a beautiful area. And I thought, this is perfect, this is what we need, we can afford it. So I wrote to them and said, we'd like to book it for this particular week, please. And they said, yeah, that's great, here's the form to fill in. Filled in the form, sent it back, and then I had an email saying, no, you can't book it. Because now we know what church you belong to, and it's not a Christian church, and you can't have this building. So I was a bit upset. In my day job, I work with lawyers, so I had to check the law on this to say, is this religious discrimination? And it isn't, unfortunately. They were within their rights to say who didn't use the building. So then I went back to their website and had a look at who else had got the building, and I found that they used it for corporate events and scouts and all sorts of things that weren't religious. And I said, well, hang on a minute. You said it's it's a religious building and therefore we can't use it, but you have non-religious groups, you have secular groups using this building. Could we not book it if they can book it? And he said, okay, I suppose you could. But I want you to promise that the whole time you're there, you won't touch the Bibles or the hymn books, and you won't say any prayers or do any sort of worship. Well, oddly enough, I wasn't up for that, so we found somewhere else. But it's, you know, I still think it's indicative of the sort of, I suppose, prejudice and misunderstanding. And it's sad, but it doesn't compare with having to have a complete security organisation to protect your buildings. We're not at that stage. And some of the things that the rest of you have been through are way worse. But it's still really hard to be singled out and to feel, you know, you're not accepted and you're not okay. And I think that, I see this a lot online, that religion and belief is one of the last things you're allowed to attack nowadays. We live in a much kinder society than a lot of years ago. Several years ago, you couldn't, you know, unlike today, you could insult people for their characteristics, for how they looked, for if they were disabled. Today, we are a kinder society. We know that that's not acceptable. It's not okay to pick on somebody because of the colour of their skin or because of their sexuality or anything like that. And yet, it seems to be okay to mock and insult and belittle them if they hold a religion, if they talk about their religion. I see that all over social media in particular, and blogs and that sort of thing. People saying, your beliefs might be sacred to you, but I am going to ridicule them. And I think that's really sad. And I think it goes against religious freedom. And religious freedom is a really important thing in our church, and hopefully in all your communities. We only have 13 articles of faith, and our 11th article of faith, and I can't read it from here so I won't, is all about the right to religious freedom. It's also something that's in the UN Declaration of Human Rights, and it's also something that's in the US Constitution. The First Amendment is about religious freedom. We all know what the Second Amendment is, because they go on about it a lot. The First Amendment guarantees religious freedom. And in fact, the city of Nauvoo, which is a city that was set up by the Latter-day Saints, that actually had in its city code as well that you could practice any religion and there would be complete toleration and complete allowance, and it was all fine. So religious freedom is really important, and it's enshrined in our country and in the world in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And yet, it seems that it's still okay to misrepresent, to mock things that other people hold sacred. I think that's very sad. I'm going to have to lean over and read this now. But this was something I came across on LinkedIn. It's quite a recent talk given at a university graduation. And I hope you're not hearing it here. It says, the best way to spot an idiot, look for the person who is cruel. Let me explain. When we see someone who doesn't look like us, or sound like us, or love like us, or live like us, the first thought that crosses almost everyone's brain is rooted in either fear or judgment or both. We survived as a species by being suspicious of things that we aren't familiar with. In order to be kind, we have to shut down that instinct and force our brain to travel a different pathway. Empathy and compassion require the mental capacity to step past our most primal urges. The kindest person in the room is often the smartest. And I think that's really significant. That's what we're all doing here, and that's so important, that we are opening those doors and breaking down those barriers and accepting and listening to what other people believe. And I think religious freedom is so important. And I'll end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anna. So just for the next sort of 5-10 minutes, I've opened it for a bit of time for discussion, which is why I've put you around tables, so I hope that that's okay. And then following that, we're going to have our wonderful speakers up to the front to take any questions from you as an audience. So if you want to just put your hand up and ask a question, please do so. If you want to write it down and just give it to me, please do so. I've already got one here. That's absolutely fine. I'll come round to see if there's any questions that you want, if you just want to ask them anonymously, or you're worried about how to phrase it and I can try and rephrase it for you. Please just don't worry about how you ask the question, is what I'm going to say. But yeah, it'd be really great to have some questions. from everyone. I was not a teacher like Sidra, but I was a school chaplain, and so I will be coming to every table. No, I won't. I won't do that. But please, just to get some discussion going, and I'm sure, I mean, I know I have several questions, and I'll be asking you questions from here to eternity now. But please do, if there's anything that's come to you, please do ask it today. It's a great opportunity. So just going to give sort of 5 to 10 minutes to have some group discussion, and then we'll come back together to ask those questions. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Whoa, which sounds really big. Thank you. As we have them gathered here in the front, can we just give our speakers a really big round of applause? I think you'll all agree it's been really interesting, and just coming round and hearing the conversation, there's been a brilliant buzz in the room, so thank you. Really just want to kick off, so if anyone has any questions or anything they would like to ask, go, lovely, go for it. If you say it, and then I'll...
Is it Colin?
It is Colin.
Hi, Colin. So you were showing some graphs there, and one of the graphs I think were showing the attacks
Yes.
or hate crimes. And I noticed there was a spike, I think it was 2021.
Yeah.
And I was wondering why there was such a big spike.
If you go back...
The question, if you didn't hear it, was why was there a spike, I think in 2021? There are spikes whenever some aggression kicks off in the Middle East. Quite simply that. Jews in this country are blamed for whatever the Israeli government does, and therefore there are attacks. There's always a spike in that particular month or in those particular months.
While you're up and speaking, you've got your own security officers, etc. How did you get on with the police when you first started? Did they accept that? That's all.
It's a really interesting question, and actually, can you hear me? No, it sounds a bit echoey to me. It's a really interesting question, and so Jewish communities are in certain little areas, sort of pockets around the country, dying to do this, going to do it, diverse audience. Hands up. I'm going to ask you a question about the Jewish population of the United Kingdom. If you know the answer, don't shout it out. So let's just start with hands up, more than 1 million. Between 750,000 and 1 million. Between 500,000 and 750,000. Between 300,000 and 500,000. Hands up if you haven't. Hands up if you think it's a smaller answer. Anyone? 3 people in the room. It's 280,000. And the only reason I make this point is because we are clustered in certain places around the country, and in those areas, particularly, you make your way out on the northern line from the centre of London, and you probably get half the Jewish population of the country. Certain parts of Gateshead, certain parts of Manchester, certain parts of South Hertfordshire. This area, small community, but the areas that have Jewish communities, we have a very good relationship with police forces, and we have from the start. I think as an organisation, the moment things changed was actually 1994. There was a bombing of the Israeli embassy, and there was a bombing of a Jewish community building in Finchley. And the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police called in the head of our organisation and said, "Who are you guys? How do you train? What's your background? Etc. etc. etc." And then after a conversation, he said, "Okay, I'll put my hand up. I know nothing about Middle Eastern politics. I know nothing about the Jewish community. You guys seem to know an awful lot about this stuff. Is there some way we can work with you?"
so that we can sort of put a wrapper around the Jewish community, so we're actually offering you proper security. And I think that was the moment. That was the moment where, from the highest level, the Jewish community started getting sort of trickle-down help all over the place. First of all from the Met, and then elsewhere in the country. Sorry, long answer.
Has anyone else got any questions? Okay, I've got a few that have been written down. This one is for Jack. So, do pagans have a symbol like Christianity have the cross?
We have a lot of symbols. The most universally recognised one would be the pentagram, not upside down, point up. Wiccans use it, heathens use it, many other different religions, pagan religions also use the pentagram. So that would be the most recognisable one. Ancient pagans had many symbols. Norse pagans and the like also used Thor's hammer, which I've got tattooed on my arm, in response to the rapid spread of Christianity throughout Europe, as a way of differentiating themselves as worshippers of Thor or worshippers of the old ways they would wear Thor's hammer. That's a tradition that's carried on today. Most heathens will be seen wearing Thor's hammer quite proudly, because it looks pretty awesome. And it's also considered a protective amulet. Thor is the friend of mankind, the protector of humanity. So it's a well-known symbol.
Wonderful. I'm sorry, Jack, keeping the spotlight on you as it's there. Really, it's also, how do you pray, and do you meet in churches or temples, or how do you meet to pray?
So there are two temples that so if we think of paganism as just one thing for a moment, there are two temples in the United Kingdom. One of them is owned by the Odinist Fellowship, who I mentioned earlier. So only a few special people can go in that one. And the other one is the Goddess Temple in Glastonbury, where the highest population and concentration of pagans in the United Kingdom is. My religion, heathenry, we have no temples that we use. My community are in the process of saving money so that we can buy land with a mind eventually to building temples. When we pray similarly to you guys. So we'll kneel before our idols, or not before our idols. Some people will pray every day. Some people will pray when they need help. Some people will not pray at all. There is a unusual misconception, in particular between new pagans that come to the religion, where they think we don't pray, we don't kneel before the gods, and that we're equal to them in some way. This isn't the case. It wasn't the case historically. There are well-written attestations from Arabic and Muslim scholars who visited the north and saw firsthand and wrote firsthand, quite honestly, what they saw about how pagans were practicing at that time. We also know that Greek and Roman pagans were obviously kneeling and praying in temples all the time. There is also some possible overlap there where Christians sort of saw some of it and thought that was a good idea, or pagans took things from Christians. The overlap went on for a long time. So yeah, we pray that way too. We'll pray at our altars. Well, every pagan that I know has a home altar that they use. They'll have little smaller effigies of their gods. They'll light candles. They'll make little food offerings as well. It's actually quite nice. I'm a pest controller by trade, so I visit a lot of people's houses. Whenever I walk into a Hindu's house, I'm like, this feels very familiar. And it's because they're polytheists, and they also will have shrines everywhere, so it'll be very much like when I walk into a druid or another pagan's home or a heathen's home, I think, we have a similar sort of outlook and understanding of how we worship at home and in groups. So yeah, we would love temples, but also there's not that many of us, and we're all over the country.
Great, thank you. We're also fortunate, of course, because it's an Essex Police event, to have lots of police officers and staff here as well, so if you have questions for them, feel free. But we also have Assistant Chief Constable Pritchard here, who has a question from somebody. Would you be able to read it out?
I would if I'd kept it on my, I think I left it on the table, but Richard wrote it down here. So I think someone's asked us whether police are happy that CPS regularly don't prosecute on hate crime cases. So I heard cite this question earlier on in the break, and I think the first point to make is I shouldn't be commenting, I don't think, on our Crown Prosecution Service colleagues in terms of what they do and don't prosecute, because it is down to them. And I don't know if there's any CPS lawyers or staff in the room, you might be, and keeping quiet, but really it is for the CPS, I think, to decide. But I just wanted to contextualise that that's interesting, don't I? Because it's a perception, isn't it, that actually maybe police are taking more and more to the door, and that's very true. We are pushing for more and more cases now to be prosecuted, and a lot of that is the clarity of what constitutes hate. And hate, as we know, is very perception driven, and it's about someone's perception around particular characteristics and whether that has motivated the actual crime itself. And that's actually quite hard to do because it is a subjective assessment based on all the facts that are available. But we're getting better and better at presenting that, and better and better, I hope, in presenting what the victim impact is of hate crime, because every victim who's subject to hate crime should have the opportunity to offer a victim impact statement in terms of how that impacts on them and their daily lives, and the fear about going out into the community after 9/11, for example. And the comment that Colin's just raised around spikes in hate crime, exactly the same for, I would say, for most of the South Asian communities, saw a huge spike in race-related hate crime based on Islamophobia, but affected actually much wider than just the Muslim population at the time. And we've seen that on a number of occasions following various right-wing and Islamic terrorism incidents. And even then, I apologise, it's wrong to say Islamic terrorism because, as you very correctly pointed out, Islamism isn't terrorism, and the two should be separated, but of course they've been associated, so I apologise for even putting those two in the same sentence, if I'm really honest. But to come to the point around CPS, we are seeing more and more charges, and to get a charge in our world, then you have to also get CPS to agree to charge. So I like to think that with an increase in hate crime charges, that's an increase in CPS coming on board and getting on that journey with us. And we have got CPS specialists. I'm a Kent and Essex officer, and I know a lot more about Kent because that's where my prehistory has been prior to coming to Essex 18 months ago. But we have got two in Kent, for example, who work in a different CPS region, specialist CPS hate lawyers, who are excellent. And I don't know, and Essex colleagues here might go, we've got the same in Essex, I hope we have. But it works really, really well, that system, because they are there as ambassadors for people who have been subject of hate crime, who understand the psychology and the dynamics of what hate crime is about, because it is unique. Much the same as sex crimes are very unique in terms of the way they impact on victims and a lot of other crimes. It's good to have specialist lawyers in this space, and we have got some great ones across the country, I know that.
Thank you very much. If the person who wrote that question has follow-up, please see Mr. Pritchard at the end. Thank you. Daniel, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a question about hate crime in the county. The Jewish community is by far the largest group impacted by hate crime in the county of Essex. Will the police investigate every incident, or does it depend on the type of incident?
So, we heard at the very start of this, didn't we, the differentiation between incidents and crimes. And of course, in many ways, not every incident will be a crime, and not every crime can be prosecuted on the evidential burdens. But there is no, let me be really clear, there's no differentiation on the way we should. If there is, then of course we would deal with that, and we would look at that, and that wouldn't be what we would aspire to do. But there is no differentiation between any type of hate crime in terms of the way it should be perceived and dealt with. But it's really interesting because I'm sitting here listening to the talk of paganism and thinking I probably overlook, as you've correctly identified, people making fairly glib remarks about paganism because everyone's quite comfortable about being prejudiced about paganism.
Yeah, we've got quite used to that.
Yeah. But isn't it interesting? So therefore I'm going to guess that it's much harder to get a prosecution home and a hate crime against, on the basis of religion against paganism.
I'm not really aware. I think there's only been a couple of incidences where it's even occurred. Really, we're quite used to keeping ourselves to ourselves. Most pagans don't make a song and dance of it. Really, we try to. There are other communities going through far worse than what we go through. It does occasionally occur. There have been a couple of incidences. There's one ongoing at the moment, but we do tend to just keep ourselves to ourselves. The problem that we find is misconceptions more than anything, and there are a lot more incidences, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, where because of because of neo-Nazi groups and because of the far right committing acts of racism, hatred, violence, that they'll then have their pictures plastered all over Facebook, and they'll have their pictures plastered all over the news, and they'll have Thor's hammer, or they'll have TWAS, which is one of the runes that they like to use. They'll have the SS Sig runes, which are also Willow or Athala, and pagans also use them all the time, and they'll have them tattooed on them, and they will be attacked by people who normally have, I say the best intentions, but they're confronting somebody on what they perceive as hate, and they're not prepared to then accept when that person says, I want everybody to be equal and enjoy their lives, I fully support you. Sometimes they'll take that a step too far. But we also don't have that big a problem here in the UK as compared to America, where it's a massive issue. But we do get some rather glib remarks. We do find ourselves subjected to mainly just patronising comments as well. Or generalisations. They all seem to think we believe in Harry Potter.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No. Great books, great books. Yeah.
But just to finish the point, I think the point you're getting to is that I think where perceptions could be different is there could be different thresholds applied by individuals based on their perceptions around what constitutes hate crime and not, particularly when it gets to the Crown Prosecution Service, or worse, or not worse case, best case arguably, if it gets to a court and in front of a jury. And then what they might perceive in terms of how the impact might be on the victim and what they might perceive as being acceptable or not acceptable in terms of behaviours towards certain communities. And when you're talking about the Jewish community, you might find there's more inbuilt prejudice in some of those perceptions. I don't know. I haven't got evidence of one way or t'other. What we should be doing, and this obvious and hopefully obvious to everyone in the room, is dealing with every type of hate crime in exactly the same way, with an absolute lack of prejudice. But is that actually possible in a community of diverse individuals? Probably not. But what we've got to do as a police service, which is one of our challenges, and it's being played out with the whole term of institutional racism and all the other things you see very regularly in the media, is actually making sure that the way we apply is equitable and fair and correct on every single occasion, that we're stamping out the opportunity for inbuilt prejudice and inbuilt bias, unconscious or conscious, being drawn into decision making, because that clearly can't be the case or shouldn't be the case.
If I may add to, sorry, I was not asked the question, but if I may just add to what you mentioned, that by far, going by the statistics, Jews have had most attacks in Essex. I would just like to point out there that probably that's the ones which are reported. There have been a lot of cases where we know exactly where the minority communities don't come up and report the incidences, which happens out of various reasons. One being not knowing how to go about it, how will it be perceived, and also it's like, I think that's a very shy concept there. It's like, oh, what will happen next? Will it affect eventually in our, say, probably credit score, financial, applications, security clearances or anything, stuff like that. So I think that kind of conversation between any services department and various smaller communities needs to happen now, and all with the social media enabling that at the click of our hands. I think it's very important that each one of us as community member does our part in making sure that we make ourselves and our community, younger generations, aware of that facility that they can approach police when they want. And as Jack was saying, like, sometimes we just ignore, we just say things we like to be within ourselves, but that's probably not right in the long run.
Can I just quickly say, Essex Police has got a QR code to report hate crime. Have you got it with us today? Do you know that?
No, that QR code's not that.
Right. there is a QR code that Essex Police will be launching very, very shortly, and it means that if you experience an incident, whatever faith, sexuality, etc., you just point your phone, QR code, and it takes you to the page where you can report the crime. And I think that is an innovation that we could be proud of. And it's my understanding it will be released very, very shortly.
We look forward to it.
Actually, just to pick up on that, there are people who, for whatever reason, might feel uncomfortable talking to the police officer. And there are a number of third-party reporting organisations. So Telmama for the Muslim community, CSTFA, my community, and several others, through which you can, anonymously or with their help, you can report in through them. They submit the report to the police for you. to take away any concerns you might have about going directly to the
Crime
police.
Stoppers as
The
well.
important, that's another a good example. The important thing is report. There's huge underreporting.
Yeah.
Okay, I am Tariq Mahmood from Havering Interfaith Forum. My question is, first I will make an observation. All the speakers have mentioned persecution and crime incidents against them. So I was just asking either PC, Catherine Springett or her colleagues, whether the incidents and hate crimes are under control, or are they going up? What's generally the trend over the last few years?
Oh, you might know. I don't know the exact data at the moment. Do you?
Yeah.
I can certainly say that the difference between the cases affecting the Jewish community, then the next group down, Muslim communities, is quite stark. But the trend is not particularly any different than it was 3 years ago. Okay. This sort of event helps because A, we're talking about hate crime, the fact that the police want us to report them, and I think the more that we have conversations like this, we break down barriers. So Essex Police, like other parts of the country, have got hate crime incidents, and on a one-to-one basis, whether there are 1,000 cases or just a handful, if you're the person impacted by that hate incident, it's impactful. That's what matters. So I think what really matters to the police is A, what we can do about it, and as you've heard, to report it. You know, and I think the point that you quite rightly said, that underreporting is a tragedy all by itself, because it skews the figures, and it also means that the response that's needed is going to be undermined, you know, from the get-go. So, but I, you know, I don't have the stats in my head, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you.
I think just one further point on that, the statistics can be a bit dangerous sometimes, because if events like this stop underreporting, so we get an increase in incidents and crimes, although it's terrible that they're happening, that increase isn't necessarily a bad thing, because the communities are starting to trust us and are reporting to us, and then we can do something about it. So I think the figures can be really dangerous in that respect. If we suddenly saw an increase after events like this and we go, oh no, we've done all this work and hate crimes going up, it's not that hate crimes going up, those hate crimes were always happening, but at least now we know about them.
Yeah. Yes.
Good question. Should the role of hate crime ambassadors be more widely publicised? I'm addressing that to anyone.
It sounds like yes.
That's your role, Hannah.
Yeah, okay. I will have a chat if that's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, it can't be a bad thing.
No, it sounds like a good idea.
If I could just quickly.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think it's massively beneficial, especially for real minority religions. This is the first time that we've ever been approached to have somebody come and talk on our behalf like this. For instance, there are more pagans in the United Kingdom than there are Zoroastrians, but there was a Zoroastrian delegate invited to His Majesty's coronation. There were no pagan delegations. We don't really get any representation at any level at all. And in fact, when you look at the lovely picture you had of the tree, there was no Thor's hammer, there's no pentagram there or any other symbols that we use, which have been in Britain as long as there have been humans. So to have a delegation and community, things like this, is great for everyone, because it gives us a chance to sit down and talk to each other, and you'll find that we all actually probably have a lot more in common than we have different. And I think a lot of other people in religious backgrounds would like to see that and have a chance to interact that way.
Thank you. Can I just say in relation to the question about the rise or rises in hate crime, that actually within the south, so I represent Southend, Basildon and Castlepoint and Rochford, we're not seeing massive increases. What we do see occasionally is spikes in certain areas, and I do believe that's down to communities working with us and trusting us. But generally what we're finding is we are solving more crimes. So whilst more is being reported, actually Southend has the highest solved rate for hate crime in the whole of the county, in the whole of Essex. So we're doing some really good work. What we're doing there is trying to get in really early. So on the day that an incident is reported, we attend on that day. We attend with specialist officers, so our community policing team officers, that are going to be following that case through all the way. And what we find is that we get victims on board at the early stage. If you're left for 2 to 3 days before we respond to you, you're going to lose interest. You think we're not interested. So by getting in really early, we're really trying to build that relationship and hopefully be able to get a positive outcome. Can I just also say, in terms of the CPS and the Crown Prosecution Service, in Essex we have a protocol with CPS where we will take investigations to them where we don't have any supporting evidence, which would ordinarily be required in a normal prosecution case. So we would also sometimes need CCTV or an independent witness or some form of video or documentary evidence. We don't have to have that in hate crime cases. All we have to have is the victim's word and how it made them feel. And we're actually getting prosecutions from CPS on those bases. Not in every case, but we're actually taking more than we would for general theft or burglary or whatever, because we realise how serious it is and how impactful it is on people. So hopefully that goes to show that we really do take it seriously and we really do want to get results for
Very good response.
Just going to take the last sort of 2 points. So, thank you.
You said that religion is a protected characteristic. I think that's not quite true. What's a protected characteristic is belief, and a belief can cover many things. I mean, we had an example of ethical veganism was because of case law was considered a belief, and I think this is evolving. There are lots of things which could be a belief, and it just depends on case law as to what it is. The second point is on the law. The fact is that the law is very much a patchwork quilt in terms of hate crime. It's not clear. For example, the law on malicious communications, if somebody sends something nasty on the internet, the law on that is the malicious communications law, which dates back, I think, over a century and relates to the post office communications. There's a lot of catching up that needs to happen in terms of social media. The third point is, I think the lady said that the hijab is banned in France. That's very misleading. The fact is France has this system called laïcité, and under laïcité every religious symbol is not permitted in the public sphere. It's not just the hijab, it's Jewish religious symbols, it's everything. So, this is not just one thing, this is the way that the French operate, quite different from here. Thank you.
Can I just quickly correct you though? Religion and belief are protected under the Equality Act. It's both of them. And I would challenge you slightly in respect of the hijab in France. I think what prompted that legislation was issues to do with...
Laïcité has been there for centuries.
We can have a chat afterwards.
Well, we'll talk afterwards.
And I'm going to win.
Laïcité has been there for centuries, since the Republic was founded.
I'm not saying that it hasn't been there, I'm just saying that the impetus for the current scenario is prompted by issues and prejudice, frankly, about Islam and perceptions of women that, anyway. Yeah.
I think we're going to have Sidra to speak as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of finish off on a very positive note. So first of all, faith hate crime increases within Islam whenever there is a terrorist activity that we know about. However, we've seen a very good response from police, Essex police. So whenever an atrocity happens, I always get a phone call around my house from Essex police. They always say to me, how can we help you? Tell me, how can we help you? They're always there at all the mosques for Friday prayers. That has definitely increased recently. And I think it's equal. So it's not just the police reaching out to us. We also need to engage with the British community. And that is, I think, one of the problems that people within the Islamic community have. We cannot expect the police to come and help us if we are not engaging with them or engaging in places like this where we are meeting other people from all these organisations. It really helps to put a, to put a name there, so that people know who to contact. And one of the reasons why it's always me who's contacted, where I'm not even involved with any mosques, is because I'm out there. So I just think that that's really important, really.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, we are almost at the close of our evening. Before I end with a reflection and also ask you to do an evaluation, it's my honour to welcome His Majesty's Lord Lieutenant, Mrs. Jennifer Topless.
I feel very humbled to be standing up here in front of all these faith leaders, experts from our wonderful Essex Police, and people who have very strong faith in their various religions. It's been a completely fascinating evening, much more than I expected. As the King's personal representative in the county, I get to see a huge, diverse group of people on a regular basis. And I have got deputies as well, and one of whom is Sidra. And Sidra is tremendously active, as you probably picked up this evening. And the first I ever heard of Sidra was that there was this remarkable woman who was organising an annual cricket match between the mosque and the Anglican Cathedral in Chelmsford. And this was bringing communities together. And wow! Absolutely amazing. I think this is great. It's this weekend, isn't it?
Yes, that's right, on Sunday. In fact, if you want to come. Broadfield cricket.
I mean, what an absolutely brilliant idea. But the whole lieutenancy, actually, we're not political in any way. We have the opportunity to bring people together. This is very much part of our mandate. I'm really sorry that you weren't asked to the coronation. I'll pass it on. Speaking personally for a minute, I mean, there's so many sort of connections that I was feeling through what I was hearing. Might surprise you to hear that my son-in-law is actually Sikh origin, so I'm very familiar with what some of the things that you were talking about. I'm afraid to say he doesn't practice, but it's a thread through his family. I see it, and I congratulate the Sikh community for what they did during COVID with the Gurdwara, where they're feeding so many people. It was just remarkable. Recently, I went to Essex Boys and Girls Club AGM in the evening, which was a very long do. Felt the need to go to the ladies upstairs at the golf club, and there upstairs were 4 of the people who had been part of the presentations and the dinner, and they were Muslim, and they were doing their evening prayer. They were slightly horrified to see me, but I was so impressed, actually, as they'd taken themselves out of the event and gone to do this. Hugely moved, as we all were, by the Hindu representative who sang mantra at the coronation service that we had at the cathedral. It was just amazing. We've all got so much to learn from each other, and I think what I'm taking away from this, which is something that I've felt for a long time, is that we must accept other people's traditions. We must realise that we have so much in common with each other, and we must build on that, and that must feed into our community as a whole. So, thank you all.
Well, really, it leaves me to just end the evening. I thought, you know, we can't gather so many people of faith, although I know that we have some people in the room who don't have a faith themselves, but to gather all together and not reflect in some way seemed wrong. So I hope you don't mind indulging me. And as I say, you know, there are people in the room who have no faith, there are people in the room who were not represented by the speakers this evening. I want to assure you that at the events that I'm running throughout the year, you know, I ran an event back in January, it was a much smaller scale. You know, I had speakers from Christian faith in terms of the more traditional Christian faith, from Buddhism, from Hinduism, and going forward in future events, the intention is that we have as many people represented as possible in different religions. So I just wanted to make that clear that everyone is included, and I think pretty much everyone in Essex was invited that I could find contact details for. So please do pass it on to communities as well that these things are happening. So if you are someone who prays, then feel free to pray during these words. If not, just to reflect. But if I ask you to just make yourselves comfortable. We give thanks for every faith tradition, named and unnamed, for the variety and richness of their spiritualities and philosophies, for their united quest for truth, for their common dedication to the pursuit of peace. We also give thanks for those individuals of no faith who actively support religious freedom. We reflect on the impact of discrimination and hate that we've heard about this evening, and the daily experiences many people have for just being themselves, for believing in something. We remember also those who have lost their lives and their liberty as a result of religious-based hate, which is still happening across the globe today. We recognise that this hate can often occur between religious groups, as well as from those of no faith. May we in this room set the standard of community by our example and our quest for knowledge, with the vision of improving relationships between different faith groups and between religious and non-religious alike. And may we always endeavour to be the kindest person in the room. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and a particular thanks to Rabbi Elf and all of the community here who have supported so much in the lead up today, but also in helping sort everything out for me. So thank you very much. If we could give them a round of applause.
Thanks to Hannah and everyone for being here.